Superdome for the first time since the 2019 season. It has been, as Mike Haas pointed out, the voice of the Saints in his column today, 635 days since the Saints last played in front of a packed Superdome. And we're going to get that today. My name's Jeff Nowak, WWL Digital Sports producer. I'd like to thank you for joining me on today's Bud Light Ingredients for Success live chat. Obviously brought to you by Bud Light, with ingredients proudly displayed on the label: hops, barley, water, and rice. Thanks for watching. And we're going to get into some of the inactives, some of the injury report. We're going to hear from Jonathan Vilma, who talked on WWL Radio earlier in the week. And then we're going to answer some viewer questions in the back half of the show. So if you have any questions, comments, watching on YouTube, Facebook, wherever, make sure to throw them in the chat, and I'll pop them up on screen. We'll see if we can get you some of the key questions answered before Week 4 against the Giants. This is a game that the Saints should win. It's what you would typically look at and say, okay, this is the trap game. Except the Saints have a lot of issues of their own, despite a 2-1 record to start the season. This is a team that hasn't thrown for 150 passing yards in a game. This is a team that has failed to possess the ball in the second half. Last week in a win that nearly cost them. I mean, the defense was good enough to pull it out, and the defense will be good enough to pull it out most weeks. But you'd like to see this team generate some consistent offense and find a way to strike some fear into the opposing defense. They have not been able to do that thus far. They leaned on the running game last week. They've put a very strong emphasis on limiting turnovers, and it's worked so far. I think that will work again today. I would caution fans about getting too overconfident. This Giants team, while 0-3, they played 3 tight games. They have a legit defense, especially in the secondary. One of the most underrated players in the NFL, in my opinion, is James Bradberry. He's not underrated in his bank account. He's one of the highest paid cornerbacks in the NFL, but he's underrated in NFL circles probably because he plays for the Giants and they have been largely irrelevant for the last 2 years, which is how long he's been on the Giants. But Jameis Winston knows James Bradberry well. He played for the Panthers for a long time. They're division rivals. They've known each other since the Little League, Jameis said earlier this week. So that'll be an interesting matchup to watch. First, let me pop up the injury report, and we can go through inactives here. Here is the Saints injury report. Nothing really to be surprised about here. Obviously, Eric McCoy, Teron Armstead still out. Eric McCoy hasn't played since Week 1. He has a calf injury. I think that generally speaking, if you look at this and you say you have to be a little disappointed that Eric McCoy hasn't been able to get back on the field, and the reason is he didn't go on IR. He didn't go on injured reserve like a bunch of guys after Week 1, which at least passively indicates the Saints are hopeful to get him back within that 3-week window. They have not. At this point, he might as well have gone on IR because he's been out the same amount of time he would have had to be at injured reserve. So I think that's a little bit disappointing in terms of what you would have hoped. Teron Armstead likely out multiple weeks. He also, I believe, avoided an IR trip, but I wouldn't expect him back anytime soon, and that's going to put a significant onus on the rest of the offensive line, on Cesar Ruiz at center, on probably James Hurst at left tackle. He played pretty well last week. We'll have to see if he can keep that up. But otherwise, nothing major. Demario Davis landed on here. He missed practice on Thursday because he had the birth of his, I want to say, 5th child. So congrats to Demario. The Giants, meanwhile, are in much worse shape in that regard. Let's pop their injury report up here. It's much longer. As you can see, they have 3 players out. Ben Bredesen, the guard, Sterling Shepard, wide receiver, Darius Slayton, wide receiver. Those 2 wide receiver absences are going to be difficult to overcome for the Giants, who have struggled to do anything on offense, period, to this point in the season. They still have Kenny Golladay, just their prize free agent signing. He's an excellent player. I expect Marshawn to shadow him. And past that, it's going to be a lot of Saquon. It's going to be a lot of Daniel Jones creating. I think one thing that Saints fans will be a bit caught off guard by is Daniel Jones is legit fast. I'm not going to call him a scrambler. Like Patrick Mahomes is a scrambling quarterback. He's very good at buying time. If you watched the LSU game last night, Bo Nix did that to a ridiculous level of just scrambling, extending the play. The offensive line does a good job not getting too far downfield, and he finds someone downfield to just break the back of the defense after what looked like a play had been dead. That's not what Daniel Jones is. Daniel Jones is a guy who's going to get out on a zone read and try to break it for 80 yards. He has done that. He has an 80-yard run in his career. It actually turned into a knocked-out play because he stumbled at the end of it. But it's kind of funny to watch a guy run for 80 yards and then get made fun of afterward. But that's Daniel Jones. But he can get outside and he can move. Sean Payton talked about that earlier in the week. Tano Passanio talked about that earlier in the week. They have to be consistent there. They have to have their edge rushes contained. They need to be contained rushes. They need to be disciplined because if he breaks around the edge, he's hard to catch. There's a clip from the Giants-Washington game earlier in the year. It was actually on a play that didn't count, came back for a hold. But if you watch it, Daniel Jones gets outside and literally outruns Landon Collins for 40 yards to the end zone. A premier NFL safety, the quarterback should not be able to outrun. Daniel Jones can outrun him. He has a top speed that is impressive. And so I think at least once or twice today, you're gonna have your arms over your head like what just happened, because he's gonna break a 20, 30-yard run, because you have to account for Saquon Barkley and you have to try to keep him inside the tackles. You don't want him to get outside the tackles either, because he can break one at any point. I don't think the Giants are gonna have a consistent enough attack to really put a scare into the Saints today, but they're gonna have a few plays where you just kind of look around like, wait, what? Because they have those home run hitters. And so that's what you're gonna want to watch. Let's move over to, like I said before, we got a clip from Jonathan Vilma here. He talked with Mike Hoss and Deuce McAllister on WWL Radio earlier in the week, and he had a lot to say about Jameis Winston. I thought it was really, really well said. So here you go.
Jonathan Vilma, Deuce McAllister's in Missouri. I'm here in New Orleans. Welcome to the show. I have not seen you. I hope all is well. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I just finished up a couple interviews with Sean, Jameis, and the guys, and they sound ready for Sunday. It's going to be a good one.
I don't know how much you talked to at all as far as Jameis Winston is concerned. Tell me about the Jameis Winston, if you knew of him during his Tampa years, and the Jameis Winston you just finished talking to.
So the Jameis Winston that I know was strictly from the football field. Never met him before, never talked to him before. So I just knew him as a turnover-prone quarterback. And if he got flustered, he would force the issue and he would throw interceptions and, cost the team a game. The guy I just spoke to is, one, very mature, very smart, football smart, good IQ, and understand his role, which is the most important thing. He understands when people try to make it put a negative connotation on being a game manager. He's fine with that. He said it himself. Look, I have a great defense. I have a great player in Alvin Kamara. I do not have to force the issue. And one thing he mentioned, which was, I thought, very, very astute from him to understand his situation and his role and who he is, he said in Tampa, if he didn't throw for 300 yards, they're probably losing the game. He said, here, I can throw for $150, 200, and we can still probably win the game, and I don't have that pressure. And so when I hear a player, the leader of your team, especially at that position, with that kind of thought process and understanding and that level of calm, a sense of peace, that tells me that he is very much aware of who he is, his role, and you can win a lot of games that way.
And there you have it. It's Jonathan Vilma, former Saints linebacker, current analyst for Fox, talking about Jameis Winston. Before we go any further, again, I want to thank our sponsor, Bud Light, and thanks for watching the Bud Light Ingredients for Success Saints pregame live chat week 4. My name is Jeff Nowak, WWL digital sports producer. Let me pop my name. There you go. Now you know who I am. Again, make sure to pop in a question, a comment over in whatever feed you're watching in, whether it's Facebook, YouTube. Make sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, at WWL AM/FM, all that on YouTube over at WWL Sports. Also going on right now, pregame show, Bobby Hebert, Christian Garrett, breaking it down all the way up until kickoff at noon. The game's on Fox. Make sure you tune in to, you can mute the TV, sync it up to the radio, and listen to Mike Haas and Deuce McAllister over on WWL AM 870 FM 105.3. And obviously, you can follow me on Twitter over at Jeff_Nowak. I will be at the Dome. I'm going to be shipping out right after I get off here with y'all. So looking forward to it. It's going to be loud, but let's see. Remember, throw your questions in there. Don't see any right now, so I'll just keep going. Make sure you throw in your score predictions. Let me know if you're going to be at the Dome. All of that. Tell me your cat's name, whatever you want to do. But first, we got Chemo over at over on YouTube. Chemo Slice. Who dat? Got a lot of who dats. It's going to be interesting to see how loud the who dat is today. But just going back to what Jonathan Vilma said, Jameis Winston, while it's been, I don't want to say painful to watch the Saints operate thus far, it's been plotting. It's been very reserved, very conservative decisions, very conservative play calling. And I think that's by design. I think the Saints offense understands who it is. It understands how good its defense is. And in a lot of situations, the best thing you can do is not hand the ball to the other team in plus territory. And the Saints haven't done that. Jameis threw 2 interceptions against the Panthers. They were in kind of desperation moments. You could argue they were rough decisions, but you could also argue you had to get something done. You had to make something happen, and it just didn't work out. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you get a situation like you got against the Patriots where Jameis just kind of gets hit. He's getting pulled to the ground, and he just throws it up and gives Marquez Callaway a chance. I was a bit confused by his initial assessment compared to what he said on later in the week on Wednesday, because initially he made it sound like he was trying to throw the ball away. He even said the message coming off the field was, if you're throwing it away, throw it away. But on Wednesday, he kind of backtracked a little bit, and he made it sound more like he was trying to give Marquez Callaway a chance, which was what it looked like in live action. So I think that makes more sense. And he kind of clarified, when he says throwing it away in that instance, like if you're throwing it away out over the sideline, you're just throwing it out of bounds. You're making sure it gets there. You're making sure the defense can't get to it. In the end zone, it's a little different. You're trying to throw it, basically at the pylon or at the crossbar, to the point that if your receiver's getting it or no one is, and that's what he did. He said he'd probably throw it a little higher, but if he got in that situation again, he'd throw it again. I think it's the right call. When I heard him say he was throwing it away initially, my reaction was, why? In that situation, it was 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9 at the goal line. You either take a sack or you give your guy a chance. Throwing it away makes no sense, because all you're doing if you throw it away is saving 5 yards on a chip shot and stopping the clock, which at that point is a factor. I mean, one of the benefits of getting sacked there is the clock is running and the Patriots have to burn a timeout or lose time. And as you saw, the Patriots ended up going downfield and scoring before halftime. So that decision didn't seem to make sense. I thought his explanation on Wednesday made a bit more sense. I think it was a terminology kind of thing, because when you say throwing it away, in most instances, you're just trying to get the ball out. You're just trying to not get hit, not get sacked, save the possession. That was not the case there. He threw it up in the back of the end zone. Callaway came down with it. It was impressive. I think Callaway deserves a lot of credit for getting that done. Jameis deserves a lot of credit for hanging in and getting enough on the ball for it not to be an interception, because that's the dangerous thing. Even though it was a free play, you could see the velocity on that ball was not very much. It was up for grabs, and I think if he had it back, he would try to put a little more on it, because it did require Marquez Callaway to make a heck of a play on the ball to get that done. The power is out? I don't know about that. Let me double check. It's not out for me over in the Mid-City area. If it went out, it went out in real time, because I'm not seeing it. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. The power does not appear to be out. There might be some outages in the city. There's been outages for the past month, so that wouldn't be a surprise. But if you're talking about the CBD area, the Superdome area, from what I can tell, they have power. It's not an issue. But we'll see what happens. The power has been out, in a manner of speaking, in the Superdome for almost 2 years. It's coming back on today with the fans in there. It'll be interesting to see how many fans really do turn up. I saw a lot of people kind of pointing out, there's a lot of tickets available. The tickets are relatively cheap. Well, for one thing, this is a matchup with the Giants, an 0-3 team who have not exactly inspired confidence. The Giants returned a bunch of their ticket allotment. I wouldn't expect to see a ton of Giants fans in the house, although I have seen a few jerseys, a few number 8 jerseys. I saw an Eli jersey the other day, so we're going to have them in there. But I don't think it's going to be a factor. And what people need to realize is, while it might not be a packed house, it might not be 70,000 people in the dome, you might be able to spot empty seats. Even if you're talking 40,000, 50,000, that is a massive, massive number compared to what has been experienced, what was experienced all year last year with 5,000, 6,000 people in there. You just can't make the noise. You can't make a level of noise that is going to impact the game with 5,000 people. It's physically impossible. When you start to get up to like 20,000, 30,000, even if it's not ear splitting, even if it's not, Jared Goff having to tape over his ear holes, you're still impacting the game, especially when they get down into the end zone areas with the fans right on the edge of the field. And those new on-field suites that Alvin Kamara says he will be jumping in if he scores a touchdown. So keep an eye out for that. We got a Giants fan in the house. PJ, good to see you. Full disclosure, I grew up in New England, so I actually grew up a Giants fan. So I actually have a pretty good appreciation for what the Giants can do, because I've miserably watched them. I still watch them, when I can, when they're not playing across from the Saints on Sundays. Obviously, I get to watch them today because they are playing the Saints. But the Giants' offense is brutal to watch at times, and while they hit big plays in the zone read and some misdirection action, they're going to lose a lot without Sterling Shepard. He has been kind of the release valve, the kind of safety valve for Daniel Jones for basically his entire career. He was averaging 10 targets a game over the first 2 weeks. He's just a guy who knows how to get open, who understands how to get open, get leverage in key spots. And without him, I think you're going to see the Giants really struggle on third down. I think they're going to hit big plays. I think they're going to air it out a little bit more this week, knowing that the Saints pass rush is going to get after Daniel Jones, and they're going to have to try to take shots against some single high coverage. Kenny Golladay is as good as there is at doing that, so I think that he has a chance to make an impact. I just don't know if the Giants are going to be consistent enough. I don't know if the Giants are going to be able to avoid the turnovers because they're going to get pressured, and Daniel Jones is going to have to navigate it. And I don't think at this point in his career he has proven he can do that. His tunnel vision isn't quite as bad as it has been. He hasn't turned the ball over quite as much. He's only thrown one interception, I think. But a lot of that's a product of they're not taking chances downfield. They're not pushing the ball a lot. They're playing very similar to the Saints, with the exception of the Saints have a little bit more of an established game plan. They have a quarterback who they trust a little bit more, and they have Taysom Hill who can pound it down the third at the end of the game. Giants don't have that. I think it's going to be closer than people realize. I think that it's going to be a low-scoring game. I don't think this is the game the Saints offense breaks out. But I think you're going to see the Saints win a game like 17-13, 17-14, which has been the story of the Giants season thus far. They've lost back-to-back games on last-second field goals to Washington and Atlanta. But I think that defense is going to come to play even without Blake Martinez. And, Alvin Kamara needs to have a big day. I don't think that Marquez Callaway is a good option to start in fantasy. James Bradbury isn't the type of guy who follows somebody around, so he might pick one side of the field, and maybe Callaway can line up on the opposite side and have an impact. But I wouldn't start him in that matchup. I would maybe start Deontay Harris if you're desperate. Tony Jones is a guy that I'd like to see break out for the Saints today, but I think you're going to see a low-scoring game. I think you're going to see a very well-played game on the defensive side of the ball, and hopefully you're going to see a loud dome. But I would pick the Saints 17-12, 17-13 in that range. How linebackers in the secondary handle Barkley in the passing game? Yeah, that's going to be, we talked to Tano Pasquino earlier in the week, and one of the things that the Saints know they have to do is try to bottle the action up. The Giants are going to try to get Saquon in space. They're going to try to get him outside of the tackle box so he can use that incredible open field ability to his advantage, break some tackles, and then just outrun people. The Saints are going to have to be smart in how they rush the passer. LSU had to do similar things yesterday with Bo Nix because they knew they had to keep him inside the pocket and they had to keep the action inside the pocket. And so what they did, which worked in the second half a little better than the first, and I think it's going to be similar to what you see the Saints do today, is they called it a cage rush, where you have the defensive tackles bull rush up the middle to kind of collapse the interior of the pocket. But then you don't have the edges just kind of pin their ears back and go. They're contain rushing. They're making sure that they're covering up the release angles. They're watching the back out of the backfield, and they're making sure that the quarterback can't do anything but step up into the bull rush from the defensive tackles. You're not going to get sacks from the edge position that way, at least, not traditional sacks. You might catch a guy not handling the rush well or trying to step around, and you can kind of get him with a long arm and pull him down. But it's not going to be – that's not the type of pass rush that you're going to see a guy rack up 3-4 sacks at the end position. It's just not. But it does limit what the Giants will be able to do in the zone read in the stretch game. And I think that's what you're going to see from the pass rush. The linebackers, you don't want to see Saquon Barkley matched up with any linebacker in coverage. Full stop. You don't want it to happen. If Quan Alexander was here, that might change the equation a little bit. You saw what Christian McCaffrey did to Zach Bond in week 2. You are asking for trouble if you have Zach Bond out there trying to cover a guy like a McCaffrey, a Saquon Barkley, a Dalvin Cook in space. It's going to get eaten alive. There's not a negative thing about Zach Bond. It's just a fact. You don't want to try to cover a running back with a linebacker. And kind of the emergence of all these great running backs is one of the biggest reasons that NFL teams don't really run base coverage anymore. They run a lot of nickel, a lot of sub packages. And so I think CJ Gardner-Johnson, PJ Williams, those are going to be the guys with the biggest challenge in terms of tracking Saquon out of the backfield. You might also see Malcolm Jenkins step up in single high coverages to give run support out of the backfield. But I don't think it's going to be on the linebackers. If it's on the linebackers, they've already lost that matchup, and you're just hoping for the best. You're just hoping they don't break for a big play. But obviously, Demario Davis is about as good as there is at the Mike position. Zach Bond, Pete Werner both played pretty well last week. Andrew Dowell is a guy who I trust. He's more of a special teams contributor at this point, but if he has to get on the field, I trust him. And I think the Saints do too. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see the Saints get a little more involved, or the linebackers get a little more involved in coverage. I think they're going to play a little more zone today than they would normally, just knowing that Daniel Jones is not going to eat them up, and you really just need the defenders to be able to keep an eye in the backfield, because that's when you get into trouble against a zone read, is when the end doesn't play with patience, doesn't hold long enough to force the action inside, so the quarterback breaks outside. So what happens there? Okay, a secondary player or a linebacker has to come up and make that tackle. The Saints like to play a lot of man coverage, and that's where you can get eaten up a bit, and that's how they got eaten up a bit against Jalen Hurts last year in week 14, week 13, whatever week the Eagles game was, because they like to play a lot of man coverage, and the zone read, once it gets outside that initial rush, if you're playing man coverage and your eyes are on the receiver, that's basically the biggest difference. You're trying to pin them to the sideline and you're playing the receiver. You don't have your eyes in the backfield. That's where you can get hit for those long runs. Because like I said, Daniel Jones can move and the DBs aren't watching. They're not in run support. So by the time they notice, by the time they're able to get their head around, he could be gone. So I think you're going to see a lot more zone today. That's kind of my long spiel. I think you're going to see a lot of cover 3, which, single high safety, 2 corners on the outside, which I imagine would be Marshawn and Adebo again, maybe Roby. He wasn't a big part of the game last week, but I think he'll be a part of the plan moving forward. And so what you see in those is, okay, single high safety, 2 corners on the outside. They're playing outside shade to try to funnel the action to the middle of the field, and then they're sinking on top of it So you have 3 deep defenders, and then you play zone coverage underneath that, which allows the linebackers to kind of cover those wide places of the flat. So I think that's where you're going to see a lot of cover 3, a lot of quarters. You're not worried about Daniel Jones beating you deep, but you just want to keep the action in front of you because you know that the Giants are going to have trouble sustaining offense. So if you make them extend the drive, odds are you're going to be able to stop eventually. Or Daniel Jones is going to make a mistake. Pass rush are going to get home. So that's what I would guess is how it's going to go. Oh, thanks, PJ. Appreciate that. Good question. Glad you're here. We got James awake at 3 a.m. on the other side of the world. I don't know what part of the other side of the world we're talking about. Maybe Australia, maybe China. I know when I was in China, it was literally 12 hours difference. So yeah, it would be. It's always tough. I'm actually in a fantasy league with a guy from Tanzania, which is Australia. It's always tough to pull off a trade because I have to organize it at like 4 a.m. because that's when he's awake. But yeah, glad to have you here. The Saints are a national draw and an international draw. It is the Saints. We are here for week 4. I'm going to let you go. Make sure to check out the last hour of the pregame show over on WWL 870 AM, FM 105.3. You got Bobby Hebert, Christian Garrick taking you up to game time. They're going to hand it off to Mike Haas and Deuce McAllister on the call. Make sure, if you're not subscribed on YouTube, ring that bell. WWL Sports. I will pop it up at the bottom here. Make sure to check out the latest news over on odyssey.com/WWL. Okay, one more question before we go. Who's starting at center today? That will be Cesar Ruiz. He is the center until Eric McCoy comes back. Will Clapp has come off IR. I imagine he will be the backup center. That's what Sean said. Earlier in the season, it would have been Will Clapp at the backup center position, but he was on IR. So I think you're going to get Clapp back. He was designated to return, but he will not be the starter. There's just no way. Derek Frazier, Saints 45, Giants 17. I would be stunned if this is a high-scoring game, but we shall see. Again, I would like to thank our sponsor, Bud Light. We've been watching the Bud Light ingredients for Saints success. Brought to you by Bud Light with the ingredients proudly displayed on the label. That's right, it's hops, water, barley, and rice. Not exactly a complicated recipe, but it works. I'm going to be drinking a lot of those at the Dome, I imagine. I won't. One of the downsides of working during the games, you don't get to drink during the game, or you at least have to be kind of creative with how you hide it. But I won't be drinking those Bud Lights, but I hope you enjoy enough to make up for it. And obviously enjoy the game. Please don't drink and drive. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Not that complicated. Don't do it. Again, my name is Jeff Nowak, WWL digital sports producer. Appreciate everyone who tuned in, everyone who dropped in a comment. You can follow me over on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. I'm going to be heading over to the Dome now throughout the game. If you see me up in the press box, wave, send me a tweet. I probably won't see you, but it'll be a good time. We're about an hour away from kickoff now, and let's see what happens. All right, y'all. Peace.